XVONE up for critical review and reaction? Is Jordan Maxwell on wanting to know, like the CIA damn well wants to know and not just believe?
Goes back to the heavens, it goes back to astrology, astrotheology, the worship of the gods in the heavens. Religion is really quite a bag. And that's why there are a lot of people who question their religion. A lot of people are questioning everything now. But they should question their religious beliefs, because that's where it's really obvious that you don't have the truth. You may think you have the truth. You may be happy where you are in your religion, but you have no idea the world, what's actually going on and what you're actually involved in until you do some study. And so that's what I've been doing. That's what I want to do, is I want to help people to understand what their belief systems are and where they come from, because it's sure, like the scripture said, to know the truth and it will set you free. I know what that feels like, because I was born into a religion. And I was always frightened to death about dying and going to hell and all these other things that we're told, until I grew up and started going to school and reading and questioning and going to the reference books and going to libraries and reading about the history of the human family and where we've been and where we are now and where do things come from. And then it all began to make sense. And finally, one day, the term is, it dawned on me where all of this has come from. And then about 18 to 19 years old, I then realized that there's a world of knowledge that we have never been told. Only a handful of people on the earth are blessed to be able to take that time and read and study where things come from, and we just listen to them. But in point of fact, anyone can do it. All you have to do is just want to know. I wanted to know, so I took the time to study and read and find out where religions come from, and where political beliefs and ideas have come from, and why we have international wars and revolutions and violence and bloodshed. It's very, very interesting, the history of the human family and where we've come from and how we got here and where we're going. And that's one of the things I've been wanting to do with my life, because there were, when I was a kid and growing up and wanting to know these things, there were people who were giving lectures the best they could with what they knew and showing where things have come from, and I followed everybody. I wanted to hear everyone. I wanted to hear all the teachers and all the philosophers, etc., because I wanted to know. And I really appreciated it. There were certain ones that I found that were absolutely, startlingly brilliant people talking about the ancient world, and I was fascinated with that. And so they were explaining where things have come from and why we believe certain things. And so that's where I learned from. And so today I want to do the same thing. I want to give back to the world what the world happened to give me, and that was wisdom and knowledge. I wanted to know, and I studied. Now listen to all the teachers, and now I know where it all came from. Now I want to turn around and do that same thing for the people today to help them, because I know what it was like when I wanted to know.
You know, we've talked about Manly P. Hall on this show. We've talked about, I mean, you said you went and you observed teachers. You knew them. You were their friends. You were their...
That's right.
You worked with them. You went into business with some of them.
That's right.
Over the years.
I not only wanted to learn from them, I would go and sit and talk with them. Wherever they were, I'd go there, fly there, and sit and talk with them, and they would introduce me to new ideas and concepts I've never heard of before. And then they would introduce me to their friends that they've learned from. And then I would go and meet them. And then the more I began to meet people and they introduced me to new people, I began to see that there's a world of knowledge that has been hidden from the human family, because most people are too busy to go visiting all around the world. People, all their teachers. But I wanted to do that. I wanted to talk directly to the people that knew. I wanted the information and I wanted the knowledge, because knowledge is power. And to know the truth will set you free. And boy, I can testify to that, because I was so concerned about my life. I was worried, sick about everything. And then the more I learned, the more I began to see there's nothing to be sick about. It's all very simple. If you just go back and look at the mysteries of the world and where they came from and the religions, it all begins to make sense. And now it doesn't bother me to know the truth, because the truth will set you free. And that's what I want to do for everyone else. That's basically what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help people to wake up and realize that there's a world out there of knowledge that you've not been privileged to know about. And the reason why is because the people who are the heads of our institutions, our educational and religious institutions, governmental systems, don't want you to know. They always want to have it over you. They want to have something on you that you don't know, and they use that against you because you're ignorant and ill-informed and don't know. And that's the way they want to keep you ignorant and ill-informed, so you don't know. And now I see, when I watch politics today, now I see what's going on. I know who the players are. I know what the terms and the catchphrases and the symbols and the hand signs, I know what it all means. And now it makes a lot of sense to me what's going on politically in the world, because I understand. But it's frightening because I know how much people don't know. The people of this world are not made aware of how the world really works. And I wanted to know, and now I see it, and I want to help other people to see it so that they can, for the first time, breathe a sigh of relief in knowing what's actually happening.
Right. Well,
so
pardon me while I interrupt you right there, because this is appropriate. The first question that I was holding actually was about this interaction with the religious institutions and the people of the world, effectively. And the question comes from Lawrence, who asks, how far down the pike do you think the people in the churches know the truth and know they're holding it from the people? Because it seems to me that the local priest doesn't know that he is acting like a controller. What do you think of that? How far up does it go before they know the truth? Now, I know that sounds like an odd question, but I think I know where he's going, and I bet you understand what he's asking for you.
I know exactly what he's asking. And I think that most of the priests are on the bottom. Then there's the bishops over them, and then over them are archbishops, and over the archbishops are cardinals, and over the cardinals are other financial powers, international bankers. And then over them is the Pope, and over the Pope is the Jesuits, and over the Jesuits are the secret societies of the Roman Empire that still exist today. And so, as a pyramid, it's always a pyramid scheme. There's powerful people as you go up. And therefore, everybody that you see who are very powerful people know they have bosses also. And they listen to their bosses. And so everybody is a boss and over everybody beneath them. But I think that pretty much today, priests around the world, especially Catholic priests, know that they are what they're doing. They know that it's not true, the things that they're teaching to people, because I have talked with rabbis who tell me, and I've confronted them in private conversations, and that's the way you find out what people really know, is when you talk to them personally by themselves, when they're not in front of other fellow clergymen. When they're by themselves, they will say, yeah, I know what you're saying, it's true, but I can't say that out there. Why? Because, I'm a priest, I can't say that, because everybody will think I'm a fool, and I already know what you're saying is true. And I've talked to rabbis who have basically said the same thing to me. Sure, I know what you're saying. And it's true, the Jewish religion has picked up all these ancient pagan religions and interwoven it into our religion. Yeah, I know that. We know that. But what am I going to do? How am I going to tell the world that? I said, you don't have to. I'll do it. I'm doing it.
Right.
And so to answer your question, I think pretty much all adults in ministries of whatever they are, all adults pretty well know that what they're teaching is not true. It's just the teachings of men, like the Bible has Jesus saying in one of the scriptures in the New Testament. It has Jesus saying to the people of his day, "You have formed for yourselves teachers." This is why you are so screwed up in your mind, because you have formed for yourselves teachers. Meaning, that's what we do. We form associations, and they are clubs, and those clubs become sects, and then from the different political and religious sects, they become churches and fraternal orders and Masonic orders. And before you know it, they become full-fledged churches. And now that they're churches, you have to decide what the people who are going to join your church will understand and what they will believe. So you have to form a seminary for people to go to study. Well, and so if you go to a seminary and you study hard and you answer the questions correctly, then you get the imprimatur of Caesar on you. The government gives you an accreditation, and now you can become a priest, and now you can become a minister. Why? Because the religion you belong to is under the government, and the government gives you permission to be a minister. And therefore, all of this is man-made stuff. It's all produced by man, interpreted by man, financed and organized and directed by man and his government. And so the bottom line is, everything it is you think you understand and believe is all a man-made institution. And that's exactly what the scripture said. You have formed for yourselves teachers. In other words, God has not sent you anyone. God has not, the divine presence in the universe that you call God has not appointed the people that you hold so dearly because they're the clergy in your church. No, you the one put them there. God didn't put them there. They're blind, just like you are. The blind leading the blind, and you're blind, and you're following them, and they don't know any more about it than you do. And so the blind leading the blind have both fallen to the pit. And so that's where we are today. People are falling prey to all kinds of nonsensical silliness, ignorance. Why? Because the people in power are teaching them, and they don't know any more about it than you do. And so it's just a business. All countries, all the nations of the world, and all the religions of the world are corporations. That's something we need to understand. All governments on the earth are corporations. They're business. They are nothing but a money-making, controlling corporations. And that's what a government is. It's a corporation. And that's what you are. You're a corporation. That's why we say, I tell you that somebody is bad company, and you say, mind your own business. What are you talking about, mind your own business? And the bad company. Company and business, yeah, and when you get married, you're going to have a partner. This is all commerce. It sounds like nothing but a business. Business, company, partner. And so the whole entire world you live in is a business, Mr. Beale. It's a profound world of business and money and corporations, and it's all being put together by we, the people. And so we are leading ourselves with our own silly ideas and our own ignorant beliefs. We are following, and so that's why I've said so many times, the more we change, the more we stay the same. We're still believing the same stuff we've always believed for thousands and thousands of years. We're still believing it today, but we just call it something different.
See,
we call it a different word.
See, that's something I want to get with you on here, because we've talked about this before too. And, I absolutely understand, agree with, and fully follow what you're saying. I mean, they are grand corporations. I mean, one of the greatest landholders on the planet is the Catholic Church. It's huge, it's rich, that's for sure. I mean, you have special tax arrangements between the governments and the churches. You have, these very profitable organizations and things, and there are all sorts of levels you can join, different levels of commitment for everybody. But here's the thing about it. Just like with government, and this is never a popular statement coming out of my mouth, so brace yourselves, but just like with government, not everything is just blatantly evil all the time for the sake of being evil. Now, government is a little less likely to do this, but let's talk about the churches since we're there to begin with. There are actually good people that get involved.
Of course there is.
And really are true believers and walk forward with a smile on their face and believe that they're doing the work of the Lord. And indeed, in some cases, they are. There are churches who feed people, who clothe people that need it, who take care of individuals when a disaster strikes. Who are the first people usually there in your community? That's your community churches, after the police get done settling things down and enforcing their policies. When there's no more clean water, I'm telling you right now, the churches will provide it to you a lot faster than the mayor will, right?
I agree with that. You're right. Mm-hmm. But that is just mankind's spirit wanting to help other people in need. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have anything with your particular religion or your God. It just has to do with a fraternal feeling among people. Your church is filled with people who appreciate when other people are in trouble to go out and help them. Right. We don't want to see children starving. We don't want to see people hurting and not do something to help them. So it really doesn't have much to do with your religion. It has to do with we the people. And people want to help each other. And so, again, we have formed for ourselves associations to help other people. So I understand the situation. It's really very interesting, though, when you find out where the religious teachings that you believe, where the philosophies that you're following in your church, where they came from, where they first started, and go back and see where it began.
Well, see, that's the thing about this, though, is when you see that, and indeed a government every once in a while will accidentally, fail in the direction of helping you, too. But there is the bottom line that there's actually people involved in the equation, so they, of their own natural inclinations, are going to do the right thing, the good thing, and they do intend to do good and right, and quite honestly are not educated in most cases about the true nature of what it is they're actually supporting. And even by doing these things, it's like, well, why would the evil entity, or why would the difficult entity, or why would the destructive entity allow any sort of help to go on? Because you gotta cloak things in something, and you've got to keep the well-intentioned person involved so that they'll continue to sink themselves into this. Now, what's interesting, too, is that when we were talking about priests and rabbis, again, a whole array of clergy out there, right?
Of course, of course.
All sorts of ministers and pastors and you name it. They've got lots of different names for them. But it is fascinating to me that the rabbis do seem to be a lot more hip to what's actually going on. There's
no doubt in my mind about that.
Yeah, and I don't know why that is. It's like, I think that the extremely well-schooled theology person in the Christian world is aware, right? Because after a while, you get to the bottom and you go, wait a minute, something doesn't make, okay, now I get it. But for the most part, it seems like the rabbis are more in touch with what's really happening and what the real symbols are. And when you tell them, look, this doesn't make any sense, and well, look, we just speaking between us. Well, I'll tell you, it's true. And I know I'm doing a voice here. I apologize, but I've had these conversations, you see.
I have too. And many of them.
And with guys from New York, with the beard and the whole thing, who will sit there and tell you, well, all right, look, this is the kind of thing we can't go out and say in public. Like you were saying, we can't say this in public. What do you think they'd do to me if I said this in public? I can't do that. But but you're right, But listen, you gotta go with the spirit of things, and you gotta understand that, they still, even though they know that something goes on, they still go, yeah, but you gotta kind of go with it anyway. And
yep, you're right. That's exactly right, and that's what I'm trying to do, is wake people up to the fact that you think you may have the truth, you don't. You think you have. But your teachings and your belief systems are based on what other men have come up with in the past, in the ancient history. There were people asking the same questions thousands of years ago that we're still answering and we're still asking today. Where did we humans come from? Where did we go when we leave here? When you die, where are you going? Well, you don't even know where you came from. And we can tell by the way you're living, you don't even know what you're doing now. So how in the world would you even want to think about where you're going to go when you leave here? Just be happy you're going. The fun is in the trip. So don't worry about where you're going. Just learn and understand what you're doing here and where you come from. And then you can pretty well figure out where we're headed as people on the earth. And let me give you a couple of examples of what I'm talking about how we accept things today and we think we understand where they come from and have no idea in the world. Christians talk about being baptized. And when you're baptized, we say when you come out of the water, you're born again. And they become a born-again Christian because they were baptized. Why do you have to be baptized? Well, that comes from the idea that is a very old and a well-established understanding of the human family, that when your mother gave birth to you, her water broke. You came out of water. Her water broke. And you came out and you were born into this world. And so if you're going to be born again, you have to go back into your mother's water and try it again. Come out this time out of your mother's water and live a different life. And so therefore you're going to be fresh and clean. You've washed away your old life. You come out of your mother's water. Mother Nature. Mother Earth. The earth is your mother. And so you go back into her water, into a stream or a river or something, and you douse yourself in Mother Earth's water, and you come out of your mother's water, and now you're born again. That's where it comes from. You're just cleaning up your life by going back into your mother's water and coming out to be born again. Very simple. Another classic example is when you're collecting money in the church, you're tithing. And some people are giving 10% of what they earn, some are 20%, some are 2%. People give money to their religious organizations. We call it tithing. Well, we have to do that. Yeah, like George Carlin says, God is omnipotent, He's omnipresent, He's almighty, He's the almighty God, but He can't handle money. He always needs a few more dollars. God doesn't need any of your money. But why do we have a tithing? It's because the ancient world, going back to Europe, realized that when you collect your food at the harvest season, you leave about 10% of the seeds in the food in a storage bin. Why? So that next year you can now have something to plant again. If you eat everything that you have planted last year, then you got nothing to plant next year. So now what are you going to do next year? You're going to starve next year. And so what you do is take 10% of whatever it is you were able to get and what's the word I'm looking for? Harvest. Take 10% of your harvest and put it into a storage house. And now next year you will have seeds to plant for more food to come. And so what you're doing is you're giving back 10% of what God has given you to eat, giving it back to God by putting it in the earth, and hopefully it will draw interest and you will have food to eat next year. So that's where the idea of giving 10% back to God. It's not to give money. No, the money's going to the people, to the corporations, to the church, which is a business. No, the reason why you give money is because you're giving 10% of the food and the seeds back into God. You're putting it back into the earth, and God makes it grow. And so God will give you something to eat next year. That's where the tithing comes from. It has to do with agricultural, saving the seeds for next year. But we today say, wow, that's a great idea. We could package that, and that's a wonderful idea. Make everybody believe God needs our money, and we can build big churches, build these monstrous, huge Vaticans and incredible temples, cost millions of dollars, and just rape the people and rip them off and take all their money. And if they don't give it all to the Lord, then they're going to go to hell, because the church needs the money. God needs the money. And who's going to be the beneficiaries of the money? The priests. They're the ones that are collecting it.
Well,
they don't have to go to work. Right. They don't have to go to work. You do.
I was just going to say, you got to pay them somehow, and that would be by taking some of the currency, because you got to adjust part of the cash flow. Notice how these words sound a lot like water, right? Yeah. And I wonder where I got that idea from. Oh, right, Jordan's with me. But here we go. You take part of the currency, or part of the current, because that's what they call it when cash, or when water is flowing in a particular direction. But also, currency is water. Okay, fine. You notice how that comes together? Sure. Anyway, you got to do that. You got to redirect it, because somebody's got to feed the priests, obviously. But also, like you said, there is that concept of harvest. Now, a couple of things came in while we were talking. Let's see, Jeffrey L., because this is not Jeffrey Matt, this is Jeffrey L., who's a regular listener of mine, said that he didn't want to ask a question, he wants to listen, and also wants to say that it's very good to hear you again, and he's happy to hear you back on the show again.
Thank you.
And that he'll be sending you an email shortly. Okay. And Bree asked about the ancient gods and the pantheon. And this is fascinating, because you mentioned hell, and she mentions some people will confuse Hades with hell in certain literatures, and that's fascinating too, because there we go back to the Greek pantheon. And Bree asks, isn't the god Hades actually mentioned in the Old Testament? Now, off the top of my head, I don't recall where, but I do believe that the word Hades is actually in there. And in fact, the literal word for the underworld, again escaping me, is also somewhere in the Old Testament. Tartarus, that's what I'm thinking of.
Tartarus, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, the Apostle Paul talks about the people of Tartarus, and where you go into the underworld. Well, when they bury you, you're in the underworld. You're not out here in this world. They buried you, so you're in the underworld. And this is why in the Hebrew there's a word called hell, and we call it. And there's a word in Hebrew for hell, and it's Sheol. Sheol is hell in Hebrew, and you find out. Look in the dictionary what Sheol is. It says it's a Hebrew word that we translate today as hell. And what does it mean, Sheol? It means just it's a grave, mankind's common grave. So it's just a grave. So if you die and you go into a grave, then you are in hell. That's why when you tell people go to hell, it means go die and get out of here. Just go die and go into a grave. We're tired of looking at you, so you go to hell. But hell is nothing more than a grave.
Right.
That's it.
But to tag on to Bree's question here, because Hades is often thought of as hell and this dark, but the truth is that everybody would kind of go to where Hades was. He ruled the entirety of the underworld, right, in the Greek pantheon. So it didn't matter heaven or hell or whatever your fate was in the afterlife, you were still going to where Hades was.
That's right. And you're still going to hell. Because hell is a grave. And if you're human and you pass away, then you're going to the grave. So graven in Hebrew is hell, or Sheol, which means a mankind's common grave. So why are you worrying about going to hell to burn forever? Because I told you that story about when I was a child in Catholic school, and there was a confirmation service for the children, and we were told that tomorrow night, the nuns told us tomorrow evening when you're in church for the confirmation service, all children have to be there, and it's going to be a confirmation service and the bishop is going to be here, and he's going to officiate over the ceremony. And after the ceremony is over, you children will be confirmed Catholics. And so maybe not necessarily, but maybe the bishop might ask you, now that you are confirmed Catholic, you may have some questions about your faith that the bishop might answer for you. And so she says, so when the bishop asks if you have any questions, just remember you keep your mouth shut. You don't have any questions. And so that didn't set well with me, because even as a child I got questions. And so that night, the next night after the service was over, the bishop did ask, if you children have any questions, I'll try and answer them. So I stood up and raised my hand, and I said, yes, Bishop, I have a question. I said, my father works with torches like a welder. And I said, he lets me hold and play with the torches on occasions. And so I know what a torch can do. I know how important it is and how dangerous it is. And I said, and suppose I had a torch and I was working with the torch and an angel appeared to me. I mean, I read about in the Bible where angels appeared to people. And they look like humans. And I said, suppose an angel appeared to me and I'm holding a torch. If I hit the angel with the torch, aimed the torch at him, would it burn him? Would it harm him? He said, no. And I said, why not? He said, well, you can't burn an angel. And I said, why can't you burn an angel? He said, because they're spirits. You can't see a spirit, much less burn one. To burn something, you need something physical, like paper or wood or plastic or something that will burn. But you can't burn an angel. I said, why can't I burn the angel? And he said, because angels are spirits and you cannot burn a spirit. And I said, then why am I worried about going to hell where my spirit will burn if you can't burn a spirit? And nobody ever thought to ask that simple question. You can't burn a spirit because burning implies fire, and fire is only used in relation to something physical. You can't burn the air. There's nothing there to burn. And so I learned then, like I have other times when I was a child, how much adults don't know. Adults, I would ask people, I would go to different churches as a kid. I would go with my friends at school. Everybody had a different church they were going to, and they all believed that they were right. And now the fact of the matter is none of them were right, and that's why none of them agree with each other, because none of them knew what they were doing. Right. And so I would go to the different churches. But the reason I went to the different churches, I really sincerely wanted an education in theology. I wanted to know. I don't want to guess or have faith. I want to know, where did these ideas come from? What is God? Where does God actually, where is God? Who am I? Where did I come from? I wanted to find someone who knew what was going on and could teach me and tell me about life. And so I finally figured out in my childhood, going to all the different churches with my friends, that no church ever deals with these kind of questions. Nobody deals with them. Why? Because they don't know.
Well, so it's interesting there too, because we're about to run out of the first hour here, and before we do, I want to enter something into the conversation here, which I find remarkably funny, because you're talking about what it is they know and what it is they don't know, and how they answered you, and nobody could answer the question about how do you burn a spirit if you can't touch a spirit, you can't do anything with it in the physical world. How do you get fire? You know, somebody once tried to explain something like that to me when I was a kid, and they wound up saying, well, you know, hell is really the fire and all that is a symbol, and what hell is the worst thing you can imagine, whatever it is. And the worst thing ancient people could imagine was being burned alive, because, you know, they didn't have the big imaginations we have today. And I said, that's interesting. So what do you mean? You know, hell is like what? The thing that you imagine is the worst thing. So, all right, I can go with the idea that God's a mind reader, fine. And this, I was having this conversation when I was maybe 7 years old. Okay, yeah. God's a mind reader, fine, I get that. But tell me something, isn't that more like what that guy wrote, his name was Dante? Because
that's exactly right.
I knew about the Inferno, and that is not a religious text, although it's constantly referenced by these people. And what's fascinating is, I think it's a whole lot more honest to say, in my opinion, or to say, I don't know, but if I had to guess, or maybe it relates to this. But, you know, because Dante could have been divinely inspired, and we just don't know that belongs in the Bible, maybe. You know, yeah. Sure, why not? I open up the possibilities, but to sit and tell me that you know with certainty certain things when you don't, I find that really dishonest, Jordan, and it's kind of going to lead to an interesting question in the next hour.
Yeah, I bet.
Which relates to something. And I'll set it up here, and I'll give you time to think about it when we go to break, because this is interesting too, and I haven't heard you talk too much about this, but I want to get more from you about it. Because divine inspiration and messages from God, this is something that's constantly brought up, right? Today you have people saying Donald Trump has been appointed by God. He's, you know, doing God's work. A lot of people say that. A lot of people say that certain works of art are divinely inspired. I had a conversation on Friday on Aaron Franz's show. And you know Aaron. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about how we didn't know where to put this in context, but it almost seemed like it was messages from the gods sometimes that come through homeless people, that come through people that seem to be a bit insane, but suddenly snap to sanity and will give you a piece of wisdom that you could have heard nowhere else. And it's really unique that messages come through some of the strangest places at the strangest times. And him and I, both intelligent guys, didn't know how to explain it. And we left it like that this does seem to have something to it. It's not, you know, it's not just our imagination. And we were sharing this experience, talking about how, yeah, you ever notice that these things come from, and we even talked about how maybe even a child who seems to know nothing will suddenly look you in the eye and tell you some really deep, wonderful piece of wise information or philosophy, just lay it on you.
Yeah, a child shall lead them.
And you don't know where it comes from, and it seems like this could be truly divinely inspired, not anointed, not chosen, not, it was written in the scriptures, but literally in real time, some things are truly divinely inspired. Now, that doesn't mean that everything that people claim is truly divinely inspired is divinely inspired. But
true, too.
When we talked about muses before, you and I think it's important to talk about what that is, and perhaps, I mean, maybe you have a much better answer than what Aaron and I came up with, but the question from Kevin will link directly to this in the next hour. And so I want you to put a little thought on it, and I want to hear your take on divine inspiration and what the scripture says about it, what you've learned about it, please. Because, again, like I said, I don't know where to put this. When I suddenly, even someone who seems to be in a bit of trouble will turn to you and stop in a moment of clarity and give you something that doesn't even seem to have come from them, but through them. See, again, it's like the muses and the art and all. There's a lot of thoughts there, I know, Jordan, and it's a lot to process, but would you mind going into that in the next hour?
No, sure. We'll talk about that. Sure.